Broadcasting from the Prairie Sportsman Studios. Presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. We're not just a radio show anymore.
Heck yeah.
This is Sporting Journal Radio.
That's right. Welcome to the show. I'm Bret Amundson. That's Dan Amundson right over there. Dan, how you doing?
Doing all right.
We got a great show this week, giving you a pheasant forecast for Minnesota and the surrounding states. We'll talk about what you can expect this weekend, and as we get into the pheasant season, we're also going to talk about where the walleye bite is right now and how they're catching them, and layout boats for duck hunting. We've got a great show coming up this week. Jared Wiklund and Tom Carpenter from Pheasants Forever are going to join us. Eric Osberg from Otter Tail Lakes Country will be here, and Joe Henry will give us a report from Lake of the Woods. Dan, who are the sponsors this week?
Haybell Heights Campground and Resort on Devil's Lake. Book a trip to Devil's Lake. Learn more at haybellheights.com. Otter Tail Lakes Country. Find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com. Lake of the Woods Tourism. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital. Plan a trip for this fall or winter at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. And Prairie Sportsman. Watch episodes anytime at the Prairie Sportsman YouTube channel or check your TV guide for rerun times.
We're excited about this weekend. The pheasant opener is finally here again. I always get excited about the opener because it essentially now everything is pretty much game on, right? I can duck hunt in the morning if I want to. We can chase geese around. I can go bow hunting. I can walk for an hour in the afternoon for pheasants or whatever the case may be. I love this time of year. We're going to talk a little bit about what it's going to be like early on in the season and what you can expect later on in the different states around the region with Pheasants Forever later in the show. But the good thing is for those of us going out this weekend, a lot of beans are off and a lot of corn is coming off right now. And I have a feeling down where we're going to hunt around the Worthington area for the Governor's Pheasant Opener, a lot of crops have been coming off down there. So I'm excited to head out and go down there. And we'll talk more about this with Tom Carpenter later in the show. But that Worthington Wells area down there is a really neat story. And we're going to be filming a segment about it for Prairie Sportsman to talk about how creating habitat isn't just for pheasant hunters or for deer hunters. It's for the wildlife, but it's also for clean water. And all that public land down there around Worthington protects the drinking water for that area down there. So a lot of good can come out of creating habitat, and it's not just for wildlife that we like to chase around with a shotgun. So excited to get down there for the Governor's Opener once again and see some old friends that you make friends at these events, Dan, and sometimes this is the only time you see them is at events like this. So it'll be good to get back there and hang out a little bit. I know we don't watch a lot of TV. It seems like this time of year you don't get a chance to watch much TV. I usually turn on Netflix when I go to bed or something like that. Dan, have you watched any Netflix or have you watched anything for a while?
I don't remember the last time I've turned on the Netflix.
Yeah.
I watched YouTube, the Wild games,
Yeah.
Vikings games, football games.
That's kind of about it for me, too, and I've been hearing a lot about this. I've been seeing the memes for the Dahmer show on Netflix more than anything else, I think.
Yep.
And it's the best one where he's sitting up next to the TV and he's like, here, I'm
Watch a movie.
I'm going to make you watch my hunting videos or whatever. I don't have a lot of desire to watch that show. I don't know.
I kind of do. I don't know. Looks creepy, but the dude's a psychopath, and I think it'd be fascinating to find out why he's such a psychopath.
Yeah. If it digs into that, but some of the stuff people were telling me about how they're reenacting some of the things that he did to people.
Yep.
Like, oh.
Yeah, that's brutal.
What I found on Netflix, though, to me is just as scary, and I think it's called Aftershock, and it's a story about the Mount Everest earthquake in 2014, 2015. And it's people who are climbing the mountain and they brought GoPros or film. I think there was a film crew there just filming. I haven't watched the whole thing, but it's like 3 episodes right now on Netflix. And I think I'm about halfway through the 3 episodes, but it's about being on like climbing the mountain. And some of these people go their whole lives saying, someday I'm going to climb Mount Everest, and they train for it and prepare for it and climb smaller mountains to get there and then finally make the trip and then climb this mountain. And they're there for a couple of weeks at the base camp getting ready to climb the mountain. And finally, it's the day that they're going to climb the mountain, all these people. And they get up into one of the most treacherous spots and an earthquake hits. And next thing you know, you're trapped and buried in an avalanche. And a lot of people died. Like it was a bad deal. But there is also a number of survivors who talk about their experience on this show. And I could not, I spend enough time in snow here in Minnesota, thankfully not under, not around avalanches or mountains. But could you imagine getting buried?
No. I don't know.
In snow?
No. Especially on that mountain.
Oh.
Like, literally the biggest mountain in the world.
Horrifying.
I'm good. I'll stick to the prairie.
Horrifying. So it is a pretty wild footage to watch, and a lot of footage from when it happened. It's crazy. I think it's aftershock, because not only like a lot of these people survived the main earthquake, right? And they're like, wow, oh my gosh, it was terrible, it was brutal, but we made it. They're kind of celebrating that they're alive, that they made it through, and then there's aftershocks.
Yeah, the initial earthquake, whether it's on a mountain or by an ocean, is typically not the worst part. It's that tsunami or avalanche or whatever is going to come and whack you next. Makes you real thankful to live in Minnesota.
Yeah, I've said that so many times. We have to deal with cold weather here and the occasional tornado, but we don't have poisonous, venomous snakes other than the occasional timber rattler and prairie rattler, and we don't have too much for spiders that are going to do a lot of damage. But I'm thankful. I'll put up with winter. That's my trade-off, not have to deal with earthquakes and hurricanes and things like that. So anyway, all right, check it out on Netflix. Coming up, we're going to talk pheasants. We're going to talk layout duck hunting, and also walleyes. And now Eric Osberg is finding his walleyes. It's all on the way here on Sporting Journal Radio.
Devil's Lake is legendary, and this summer has been legendary for walleyes. Don't miss out. Call Haybale Heights Campground and Resort today to book one of their modern cabins on East Bay. The cabins are furnished with a full bathroom, kitchen, and all the amenities like high-speed internet, and are clean following CDC guidelines. Staying at Haybale Heights gives you full access to a private boat launch, fish cleaning station, and beach area. Learn more at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com. Plan your trip to legendary Devil's Lake today.
It's beginning to be that time of year where my productivity level is going to drop significantly, because most likely I'm going to be doing a whole lot of hunting between bow hunting, waterfowl hunting, and now that we have the pheasant season open, I'm sure I'm going to take a little bit of time as every chance I get to go out and walk some grass a little bit and see what's out there on the landscape. And that's my favorite part about it. Obviously, harvesting pheasants is great. Watching the dog work is most of the enjoyment, but just getting out there and walking into parts of the planet that the majority of the population never steps foot on, seeing different types of wildlife, just seeing the wild outdoor landscape is what I enjoy so much about it. And it's finally here. I'm excited about it, and we're going to talk about the upcoming pheasant season with some guys from Pheasants Forever right now. Jared Wiklund is going to join us, and Tom Carpenter. How you guys doing?
Hey, Brett. Great. Thanks for having us on.
I'm excited, and I'll tell you what, I'm more excited than I was than I thought I would be a couple of months ago, because with how dry it was this spring, I was a little worried about what our numbers were going to look like. But it sure looks like those birds rebounded and had a pretty decent hatch this year so far.
Yeah, I think, in a lot of the travels and the talks I've had with members and some of our staff is that, even though we did have that drought sequence, we had a lot of water early on, and then it dried up at the perfect opportune time for hatching and brood rearing in June and July. When you look at drought conditions as a whole in Minnesota, Iowa even, they're not as pronounced as when you go further west. So sometimes drought can actually be really good in more of these eastern locales, I guess, when you get over more towards the Mississippi River, and not so much, on the west side of the Missouri. So it's been good, big broods, and we're hearing great things from our staff and partners.
Well, I tell you what I am excited about is up until last year, I think, I expected to get my feet wet every time I went pheasant hunting. I'd go over my boots all the time. So I think there's going to be a lot of thick cover, cattails, sloughs, things like that people are going to be able to get into, and that they haven't been able to get into in a number of years.
Yeah, I would think, honestly, I think the late season hunting, you might see a few more hunters out because they don't have to deal with those types of conditions this year. But you're absolutely right. Even where I am in the east central region of Minnesota, it's incredibly dry. We are getting some rain today, which is great, but that really doesn't matter much anymore unless we get a huge pour of rain and maybe some wet snow early on like we did a few years ago. But I think the late season conditions are going to be wonderful for folks. And that's a favorite time of year for a lot of hardcore pheasant hunters. As you know, you do a lot of late season hunting, being able to get into those sloughs and find the birds are where they are. They're going to be next. You're going to put the bedroom next to the kitchen, so to say, and you're going to be focusing on winter habitat next to a food source. It's a pretty simple recipe.
I know every year, especially right at the beginning, you'll see some young birds. Do you think that there were more successful hatches later this year, or do you think it was more of a normal year as far as brood rearing?
I would say normal based on what I'm seeing. I mean, obviously there's going to be a couple hatches where, a hen loses a nest to a predator or something happens. Maybe you're in an area where that did get a little bit of rain, but for the most part, Minnesota and basically all the pheasant range, the earlier that we can hatch chicks in the season, the better chance they have for survival. They're putting fat on, they're learning, predator avoidance instincts earlier on, all those good things. They've got a lot of time to grow up. So I'd say most of the roosters that I'm seeing are completely colored out already, which means we had a really early hatch and we put a lot of birds on the landscape earlier in the year, which is good for pheasant populations.
Yeah, that is great. And one of the reasons, I always look forward to opener, but I look forward to later season hunting more. I get more excited about hunting later in the year, and a lot of times because it's warm, around opener, usually the temps are a little bit warmer and a lot of crops are up. But for around here, I think all the beans are pretty much done. There might be a few fields still standing, but for the most part, all the beans are done, and a lot of corn has been coming out quite a bit lately.
Yep, same on this side of the state. I guess I haven't looked at crop reports to see how far they are, but I've been told by staff that most of the areas are ahead of where they've been the past few years. It's been dry enough. The corn is drying down super quick, and that's a benefit to bird hunters when farmers are getting out there and getting those crops harvested. So yeah, I think all things considered, it should be a pretty good opener, especially if you can find areas with quality habitat in some of those areas that are marked as good on the prospects map for Minnesota, and that crop is out. I think you're going to have a pretty good hunt here on the opener and basically all the way through the season.
Well, Jared, I want to talk about some of the states surrounding us too and what their outlooks are going to be for the pheasant season this year. But let's bring Tom on here for a second. Carp, I know you like late season hunting as much as I do. I'm going to be down in Worthington for the opener, though, for the governor's opener. I'll be down there this weekend, and I'm kind of excited to be down there because we're going to tour the Worthington Wellhead area down there. And I'm sure you're very familiar with that story, of course. Have you ever, I would like to hunt around. I've toured it before. I know the story behind it, but I've never had a chance to kind of hunt that. And the amount of public land that's down in that area, there's not a ton of public land, but I think we're going to film a story about the Worthington Wellhead for Prairie Sportsmen. I think that is a neat story. I think that whole area and what they've done there and what opportunities that's opened up for pheasant hunters and other wildlife, for the most part, just to create all that habitat. I think that's a great story down there, Tom.
It is, and it's great for hunters too. I mean, there is a substantial collection of public lands down in Nobles County in the Worthington area, Jackson. You get a little north of there up into Cottonwood and toward Windham. And it's thanks to our chapter's work down there, chiefly the Nobles County chapter, but the other chapters too in partnership with them. And there's more public land than you think down there. There's enough to keep plenty of people busy for a long time. And there are birds down there late season too there. I went down there in mid-December last year, and the birds are educated, but they're there. It's no surprise you got to work for those late season birds. But I've hunted that Worthington Wells area for a long time. And there's a lot of land there. Scott Rawl, one of our PF legends and the chapter leader down there, will tell you there that if you walk the perimeter of some of these connected lands down in that area, you can go 14 miles on public land. So don't discount the plethora, to use an old-fashioned word, but there's plenty of public land down there to hunt, and it's good too. It's managed well. There's a lot of good nesting habitat, and we all know that, one of the bottom lines of pheasant numbers is, do they have a place to nest and raise birds? And that is what they're all about down there, is prairie habitat, which in particular for that Worthington Wells area is what you need as a water filter for that. I can't even say the right name of the river down, the Oceadon River. I'm saying it wrong. People will correct me, and that's okay. Yeah. So that's sort of my viewpoint of down there. I think there's a lot more young birds out there this year, from what I'm hearing, than what Jared might be seeing in that east central neck of the woods. I think there's some of that early rain might have hampered some brood production, but the late dry weather, as we're all sort of agreeing has happened and drought this year, I think there's going to be a lot of young roosters out there, and there's going to be substantial numbers of birds that are going to survive these first week or two of the season, or 3, and be out there later in the season to sort of replenish the stock, so to speak.
Well, and I know they're adding some more public land this weekend, or they're dedicating another WMA down there during the opener festivities. And you mentioned Scott Rawl; he's responsible for a lot of that public land down in that part of the state. So it's been fun to watch him work while he's down there, and we're looking forward to getting down there and walking through the grass a little bit. Tom, where are you going to be out for opener, Tom? Or are you going to? I'm sure you're going to be out somewhere, I bet.
I'll be out on the western edge of Minnesota, so that's where west central Minnesota.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me where. I just figured I figured you'd be out there somewhere. It's okay not to tell anybody where you go. I know where you go. You don't have to tell them where.
Anybody who listens to me knows I'll tell you how all day, but never where.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
right.
That's what we have tools like Pheasants Forever's partner on X and all the other things for. I mean, the hunters, pheasant hunters, have never had a better opportunity to find public lands, and by the way, good public lands upon which to hunt. And here in Minnesota, we have just no shortage of public lands. We have a richness of public lands. Over 1 million acres of wildlife management areas in what's considered the prime pheasant range. I'd also offer, and you know this, Brett, that when you get, there's a lot more pheasants north of what we as a pheasant hunting community consider the prime pheasant range. There's a lot of good places to the north of that. And especially in a year like this, like Jared said, where the hatch is good. Yeah. There's going to be no shortage of opportunities. I always share the story. A couple of years ago, some guys from my hometown in Wisconsin called me and said, Tom, we're heading to South Dakota. We want to stop off and hunt in Minnesota on the way. And it was getting toward late season. And I told them, western 2 tiers of counties, anywhere from the bottom of the state, a third of the way up. And I gave them the names of the towns we all know out there: Marshall, Canby, Madison, Pipestone, you name it, Worthington. And they called me a couple weeks later. I said, how was your hunt? How'd you do in South Dakota? They said, we never left Minnesota.
That's great. That's funny. We're going to definitely cut that out of the show for sure. We're not telling people it's good in Minnesota. No,
nobody will do it. They won't do it. Just so. I even, you talk about going north, and maybe Dan can pull up that distribution map again, or that forecast map of the state. I remember when I lived in Fargo, and there was a couple of times where I traveled east, and I didn't have to go very far to find pheasants up in that neck of the woods. And you may not have as big of a population as you do down in the south, but if you put your time in, I usually found birds around there, and it was on public land too. So there are definitely some more places that you can go. Minnesota doesn't always get the glory as a pheasant state, so I think that leaves some opportunities for those of us that do spend a lot of time here. But you can usually find birds in a lot of places in this state. Yep, you're right. And even Jared,
but all the hunters out there should go to South Dakota in Minnesota. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Well, like Jared says, that East Central too. I mean, you think about some of the opportunities there and where there's public land, and think about late season public land. You can see the color on the map there. It's no big surprise that you get some dark brown up there in that west central. And because, by the way, it connects to what is probably some of Wisconsin's best pheasant country in the northwest quadrant of Wisconsin.
I think the roadside reports, kind of like we've been pointing out here, if you bring that map up again and take a look at it, that sort of Otter Tail, Wilkin, Traverse, up into Clay, you start getting up into prairie chicken territory, more sharp tails as you go further north, but you sort of get in that forested, shrubland, grassland sort of biome region where it's sort of a crossover, where you're thinking maybe more rough grouse than pheasants. But as a guy that's got family out in those areas, particularly otter tail, Todd, and other places, the amount of pheasants that they've seen over the years has started to go up. So don't discount those areas. But one thing I did want to point out is when you look at the prospect maps from 21 to 22, it's basically a flip flop. A lot of the places that were white went to very poor. The places that were very poor went to poor, and so on and so forth. And I don't think it's not a secret to anybody that in the sort of main pheasant range for 2022 in that prospect map, when you take sort of Big Stone, Lacaparo, all the way down through Brown and Blue Earth counties, it's turned to solid brown this year, and that's exactly what we were hoping to see. Those areas, if you look at August roadside counts and the entire PDF that the state puts out for that, and you look at the areas where they've got the most grassland habitat, they look at the square mileage of grassland habitat, and it matches up extremely well with what you're seeing on this map right now. Like I said, all the way from Lacaparo down through Blue Earth is where you've got the largest stretches of grassland in the state. So, and there's a lot of outliers there that have plenty of pheasants that people should visit too.
I think it'd be fun to film, and this would take forever, and I don't know if you'd be able to do it, or how long it would take to do.
Yes,
I don't know how long it would take to do it, but it'd be cool to try to shoot a pheasant in every county, in the southern half of the state or something like that. Try to see how many counties in Minnesota you could shoot a pheasant in.
I've actually got a friend in Iowa who's doing that in Iowa right now. He's
really?
trying to mark off all. I think is it 99 or 100 counties they have down there. I've been gone so long from the Hawkeye state I can't remember anymore. But he's been very successful. The ones that he's gone to, he's checked off the list. I think he's at least halfway or over halfway through, which is pretty cool.
How is Iowa looking for pheasants this year?
Iowa's looking really good. They had, roughly just under a 20% increase, which was good. Sort of expected when you look at the winter weather that they had, followed by spring weather. It was nice and dry, sort of similar to what Minnesota had, especially in the northern, northwest, and sort of west central parcels. The roadside counts are really high. You can see it on the game distribution map on the screen there for pheasants, but there's a lot of great areas. That northwest is always good, especially when you get up in that Great Lakes region of Iowa. It's got the biggest concentration of public lands in the state. And a few years ago, I really like west central Iowa too, along the I-29 corridor. Driving down through there, you've got a lot of IHAP, Iowa's Habitat and Access Program enrollments that Pheasants Forever helps out with the Iowa DNR. And you can look on there. There's some very good pheasant hunting opportunities throughout the state this year. Even into central, where I used to live, you've got pretty strong populations this year. And I'll throw in a little nugget. I also just got done writing the Iowa quail forecast, and if you're looking at hunting quail this year in Iowa, you can have a nice combo hunt, sort of in the west central down through the southwest. They've got pretty good quail counts this year. If you know where to look for, weedy habitat, shrubby habitat that borders some type of agricultural crop is a great recipe for bobwhites.
We should do that, Dan. I don't know if I've ever really hunted quail. I mean, I've kind of been in quail country, never really seen them, but it'll be kind of fun to go down, and that wouldn't be too long of a drive rip down there and try to find some of those little birds. What about Wisconsin this year?
Wisconsin's actually looking pretty good too. They had an uptick in their pheasant counts this year, especially in the western and northwest portions of the state, which is sort of the primary pheasant range. We've got a number of different staff that live over on the western side of the state, and what they've been seeing when they've been driving through grassland areas and around some of the landowners that they live around and even the public areas, they've been seeing some pretty decent brood sizes and pretty happy with what they're seeing. Enough that, they can go out to a waterfowl production area or some type of wildlife management area and shoot a few roosters in Wisconsin this year. So if you're a Wisconsinite and living over there and looking for wild birds, the western and sort of northwestern portions of the state is a good place to go. Those waterfowl production areas can tend to hold quite a few, actually, as long as you've got a crop source nearby.
How is habitat doing in North Dakota?
In North Dakota, it's really recovered from the amount of rain that they have. Everything is green. When we talk with some of our staff, Bob St. Pierre, who I know Bret, when he went out there for sort of the sharptail season, it's a complete 180 from last year. Last year, if you could find quality habitat that wasn't drought stricken, that's where all the birds were. This year, you've got a wide range of just green, lush ground, and carp. You can probably talk to some of this too, because I know you've been out there. Is that the habitat out in North Dakota is looking really good, and I heard pretty good reports from sort of the resident only opener here this past weekend.
Yeah, I can echo that from at least a sharptail perspective. I've made two trips out there after God's birds, which are sharptails as I fashion them. They're one of my favorites, and the habitat is looking good out there. In fact, we hunted some of the sharptail country. There's too much grass. It was hip high. It was too thick. You're like, we got to get out of this. Anybody who's ever hunted sharptails in North Dakota or South Dakota or real prairie sharptails, as opposed to those that have adapted to other environments, and they're very adaptable birds, by the way. But we found a lot of grass that wasn't even suitable for sharptails, that usually is, because the habitat was looking better. It looked more pheasanty than sharptaily. So I can echo that. I'm going up to North Dakota week after next to hunt with our Pheasants Forever Knife River chapter up there. They're a superstar chapter up near Bismarck, and I'm looking forward to that hunt big time.
For a guy talking about God's birds and working for Pheasants Forever, I don't see either one of them behind you there, Carp.
They're all in the other room.
He's got too many.
I would have hung. I got to be honest. I hung one up. I did an Onyx class a couple weeks ago, and I hung a pheasant up behind me there, where you see some of my deer antlers. I didn't know. I thought this was just a radio show. I thought otherwise I would have put one up. So that's what you get as basket racks, turkeys, and that's
Bret,
it.
Bret, you can't see it, but on a really good day when we're having conference calls for Pheasants Forever and partners and stuff, and Carp is on those, if he sits just right, it looks like that big 10-pointer is just coming straight out of his head. I always say, man, I'd like to harvest one of those. Anyways,
that's great.
Here, I can try and do that for you here if you want. There. I can't do it. There, baby. I can't do it.
That's all right. All right. Well, what about South Dakota? And do you think that the extension that they've put onto their season, has that affected things at all at this point?
So South Dakota overall, I think it's pretty easy to determine where wild bird populations are going to be this year. If you look at the drought map of the state, so basically south of the I-90 corridor, it is dry as popcorn, and there probably wasn't as good a bird recruitment down there this year. North of there, the rains returned. All the different landowners that we've spoken with, Eric Johansson would be one of them, who, Bret, I know you've met before. Mm-hmm. They're seeing some great things on the landscape, talking with our state coordinator and our farm bill biologist. They work with a lot of landowners throughout the year. So they are seeing some pretty good returns. Obviously, They don't have the brood count anymore, so it's hard to get like an exact number on relative abundance. But everybody's saying the birds are up, especially north of I-90 when you get in that corridor where the rains have returned, the habitat returned, and the birds responded. So I just talked to our state coordinator, Matt Morlock, this morning, and he was actually driving around doing a little work on his farm. He's sort of between Redfield and Huron, and he said he drove past a walk-in hunting area. I can't remember if it was walk-in hunting or crap and roam. I think it was walk-in hunting, and he said he saw probably 25 roosters in the ditch plus all the hens that were with them just in that place. There was nobody hunting them during the resident opener. So I think things are looking good there. Obviously, we could use another easy winter to get the birds back on track, but the habitat's looking great, especially further north you go in the state. And that seems to be the bird forecast in general throughout the pheasant range, throughout the sharptail range. The farther north you go, the rains return, and that seems to be where the birds are. But as far as extending the season goes, I can tell you that I have enjoyed going out there late season. The past 2 years, I've hunted basically the last week in January. Last year, we saw one other hunter in passing. That was it. We had all sorts of crep and walk-in areas to ourselves. The birds, the birds were all huddled up in good cover right next to quality winter thermal cover right next to the food, and it was a very enjoyable hunt. So if you're looking to sort of extend your season, South Dakota, I think, is a really great option, especially if you live in one of the bordering states.
Gosh, I want to do that. I feel like January starts to get busy. I got to do SHOT Show this year and some other shows, but we should try to. I want to make a trip. Like, I've hunted pheasants in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, both Dakotas. I've never gone outside those states to chase pheasants around. Tom, if a guy like me who wanted to actually take a travel trip outside of these 5 states and hunt pheasants, where would you tell me to go?
Outside of North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa.
And Wisconsin, yeah.
And Wisconsin. You're in the heart there.
That's why I don't go anywhere. I don't have to.
Right. You know where I'd do it? I'd go to Montana.
Oh.
And experience big sky pheasants. Everybody's got to do that. I've hunted Montana, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, and they're all great. You could almost pick any one of those. But I'd say Montana, especially in a year. I think their pheasants are pretty good out there this year, from the reports I'm hearing. Another good year, and they'll be even better. Now, that'll draw a lot of hunters, but yeah. Montana can be sort of a bucket list, once in a lifetimer, shooting roosters out there. I mean, some areas of Montana, you look at it, you're like, you could be in the middle of South Dakota or the middle of southern Wisconsin. But other areas, there's mountains in the background, and it's magnificent. So I'd say Montana for a bucket list type adventure.
That would be neat to do it with the mountains in the background. I did hunt in the Badlands of Western North Dakota a few times, and there were a couple of retrieves where we were hunting, kind of the bottoms around these buttes, and I know I shot one, and the bird was flying over some sort of cliff or draw or something, and it dropped into there, and I just watched my dog go, I'm like, uh-oh. But she came right back over the top of that thing, straight up this steep embankment, came right up over the top of that bird in her mouth. It was some interesting hunting out there.
That's what labs are all about. I would say one other note, though, is, failing to mention Kansas and Nebraska can be a mistake. Those are good too. Now, but as Jared said, and I wrote in the Pheasant Forecast this year, the rains returned north. They didn't return south. And he's right. South of the I-90 corridor in South Dakota and down into Nebraska and then Kansas, it gets worse and worse for drought. And bird numbers, I do believe, are down there this year. So those would be 2 other states. And for a good Minnesotan like you can get up early in the morning and be hunting in Nebraska in the afternoon.
Yeah.
If you leave early enough, you can't do that with Montana. And Kansas is farther, but you think about a late season hunt and January hunting, Nebraska, baby. Yeah. It can be good. So But
And
I'd say
they're
Montana for big adventure, and Nebraska just to get out and get something in, maybe late season.
I think carp is absolutely right too. In that, like places like Kansas and Nebraska, there's still a lot of CRP there. There's still a lot of production in some places as long as the weather's cooperating. And you've got those seasons that stretch into late January as well. You can add quail to the mix. I think quail is maybe a little bit brighter forecast in some of those areas this year, and you're going to obviously have a little mixed bag opportunity when you throw some potential pheasant habitat in there as well. So yeah, I would agree with carp. I think those would be good picks to consider outside of Montana and sort of this Midwest region. But Bret, I just want to. You mentioned that you don't do much hunting in January. So after we get off this podcast, I think we're going to have to have a little talk about your priorities and getting those straightened out and maybe doing a late season hunt this year.
Let's go. Let's get it planned. I'm in. You don't have to ask me twice. I don't do a lot of late season hunting because I can't. Generally, it's either closed here or it's or I'm working a show somewhere or something like that. But
I don't agree with that. Everything I see, you pheasant hunt all December and that's it. Because you're coming up, the waterfowl trail is starting to freeze up, and I think it's just January that we need to get you out. Everything I see, you're hunting pheasants every day in December. So.
Yeah, pretty much.
Don't give us a sob story.
I'm pretty sure you turned down a January invite from Jared last year too.
Well,
I'm pretty sure you did. Yeah.
What did we
Aberdeen?
No, I think you just didn't go.
I
think you're chicken. You're scared of the cold.
Right.
Yeah.
You talk all about it.
Walking through that
you
stuff?
talk all about it and you don't go.
Gosh,
I know the chance.
I am in. I want to do that late January deal in South Dakota so bad. And I was thinking about a Nebraska trip. We turkey hunted down there this year, and I definitely saw some birds around. And Nebraska is kind of what I was thinking as well until I started thinking about Iowa. Now you got me thinking about Montana. Man,
all the states. Some of your listeners might remember, Bret, that you and I hunted a waterfowl production area in South Dakota as part of a media deal a few years ago, and there was three of us, and that was probably one of the most enjoyable hunts that I've had on my mind for a long time. You're a guy that likes to hunt quiet. Just kind of send the dog with hand signals. I'm sort of the same way. And I don't know if you remember, but we got back in that waterfowl production area. There was a bunch of human tracks all over it, except for the very back. And it was a jungle of reed canary. And when we got back there were some pretty special things that happened as far as the birds go. Man, it was, I don't know if you remember that, but it was pretty lights out pheasant hunt.
Yeah, no, I remember that very well. And that hunt just reinforces my philosophy on a lot of public land hunting is sometimes you just got to go to the very back or find the thickest piece, especially if that piece gets walked a lot. You got to find the part that's hard to get to because a lot of guys won't go back there or can't get back there, especially later in the season when it's full of snow and there's a lot of snow on the ground. If I remember that day too. And, yeah, that was a fun hunt. I had a great time.
I think we got stuck.
We did get stuck. That's right.
Here's your carpism, guys. They're called hell holes, and you got to get in.
There
hell
it
holes.
is.
Love it.
Hell holes. Hell holes.
I'm sure you've written about those places many times, Carp. And we got a new magazine coming out, right? What can we expect?
Well, I don't know if people can see. This is what you can expect. It's it should be arriving in mailboxes any old day now. It's all printed. It's the fall edition. There's a lot of good stories. It's a lot of hunting. One thing I'm pretty happy about is three, I call them good reads. They're fireside reads. They're pheasant hunting classics. And those are really good. I mean, we all talk about techniques and places like we're talking today, but there's also the tradition of pheasant hunting, and that's what some of these stories get at, and that's important too. That's what we're trying to build with new hunters, build new traditions, and that's part of what this is this issue is about is to inspire that. One is called Pheasants Beyond Autumn. It's a great read, a classic from John Madsen, a very well-known outdoor writer who had a lot of classics. He wrote in the 1970s, 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Wow.
And then there's a story following by Chris Madsen, his son, longtime editor of Wyoming Wildlife, and it's his take, one of his takes on pheasant hunting. So there's that father-son comparison. And then there's also some very interesting hunting how-to stories. One about grit. You might think grit is boring, but our writer Andrew McKean takes it to a new level with some scientific research, and also how hunters can utilize grit. We play up one of our members, or one of our great photographers, Eric Peterson, got together with one of our board members, Douglas Follett, and they brought some new hunters out in the field. That's called Ripples, and there's a companion video. So I could just go on and on. And I'm looking as you do these magazines. I released it to the printer about Labor Day, and you sort of forget what's in there, and then you sort of rediscover it. Yeah. So it's a great issue. I saw the print. Mine came in the other day, my special box, early box. So be ready for it if you're a member. If you're not a member, or you're late in renewing and you want to get this issue, email me, tcarpenter@pheasantsforever.org, and tell me, I'll believe you. Oh, I just joined, I need the fall issue, or I didn't renew, but now I've renewed. I missed the list, because you missed the list if you weren't a member current as about September. Email me, tcarpenter@pheasantsforever.org, and I'll get one of these sent out to you. And just for getting back involved, joined up, or renewed with the organization.
It's a cool picture. Let me just.
Sorry.
That picture.
I was just saying one last thing I was going to add is that Carp wrote a blog about that picture on the front, and said if that picture doesn't get you fired up for the season, you might want to go get a doctor check on your pulse. And I would agree with it. It's a pretty cool photo to kick off. If you can see, I'm having spatial difficulties getting it on the camera, but you can see that he just shook some water.
Oh, and look at that.
It's also interesting to note, look at that ring. We had some discussions here internally about that neck ring. And somebody was saying, well, is that a Sichuan pheasant? Is that that must be something different. It's like, if you haven't shot a pheasant with a neck ring like that, you haven't shot many pheasants. They're as different as you, as me, as Jared. There's all kinds of genetics in there. And that's a wild pheasant. His neck ring doesn't meet in front just because, just the same way that I'm especially handsome. They're all just different, right? Touche. So it's a great issue. I hope everybody's excited to get it. Like I said, email me if you are late in renewing or signing up and want to get it, and we'll get you on board.
Who took that photo on the cover?
I'd have to look it up here. I can't quite recall right now.
It's a pretty cool picture, and I'm guessing it was a little bit breezy that day. And I've taken pictures of roosters in a wind when the wind's kind of at their back, and sometimes the tail is all bent sideways and there's feathers all out of place. And sometimes it's hard to make them look good when you got a wind like that. But that's a nice photo. And I think you got another really cool photographer that's got pictures in that issue. I think. I don't know. I don't have a confirmation yet.
Eric Peterson, or
I think I've got a couple pictures in there.
I don't.
Oh, I did say cool photographer. I said there's an average photographer that's got a couple pictures in there. Is what I should have said.
We expect to see a lot more from you in the future.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know what pictures you guys use though. Do you know?
I'll have to look up and make sure. I think they're in the winter piece, aren't they?
Because Logan just said, "Hey, we're going to use a couple photos." I'm like, all right, sounds good. And so I didn't ask him which ones you guys used, but I'm excited to see it in any case. So
I think it's one of those hands gliding into the corn.
Oh, sure.
Coming right at you.
Yeah, that's cool. So, well, I appreciate that.
It's a good issue. We're going to get some of the stories up online here too, but like I said, send me an email if you join or renew and get it, and keep up your membership with Pheasants Forever. Everything we're talking about here today, it all comes down to habitat. if the birds have habitat, in particular nesting habitat, that is the key. Food is important. Winter habitat is important, but without places to nest, without that prairie grass, wildflower, forb, pollinator habitat, we don't have pheasants. And maintaining your membership in Pheasants Forever is part of the solution. Not only the money that you contribute, but also the numbers of people we have advocating for the uplands. And nobody can tell you better than Jared the power of this Pheasants Forever family for getting stuff done. I won't use that word I used before. The power for getting stuff done on the landscape. Amen, brother and sister.
Can I just say that lifetime membership, I think that's a bargain. I'm surprised more people don't do that when you think about it. I think that's a heck of a deal. I'm surprised it doesn't cost more for that.
Yeah, you think of all the generous folks who do a rooster booster every year at $75. And 10 years, you're almost paid for a life membership. Just get a life membership. And it's a great deal. You get the magazine for life, and I think it's a great magazine. I would. But you also get all the other, and there's status to be a life member. I mean, you're a life member. That's a big deal. And all the, you get the certificate, the plaque. And but most of all, you're putting $1,000 to good use toward the habitat mission, and that's what it all comes down to.
Well, I think I'm due to renew mine anyway, so I'm saying it right here. I'm getting a lifetime membership today. So
let's go.
It's happening. I don't know do it sooner.
Do it at Pheasant Fest and have me do the sign up, and then everybody will think I'm cool.
Is there still a T-shirt promo going on for those who renew? Or is that
I think you'll have to check. Bret pulled up the website. I don't know. Jared and I aren't 100% involved, but there was a good T-shirt and cozy offer.
Oh, you're wearing it. No.
This thing is my favorite shirt now.
Trampled by Pheasants is Trampled by Turtles promo that we do. We also have a hat, pheasant hunting hat with the Pheasants Forever logo on it, and neck buff combo right now. There's all sorts of pretty cool stuff to choose from right now, but those are our two biggest offers of the fall. And if you're going to sign up for a membership, do it online and make sure you sign up for those promos. You can find them at pheasantsforever.org.
Pheasantsforever.org. Anything else coming up for PF that you want people to know about?
The one big one would be National Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic is back in Minnesota this year. It's going to be at the Minneapolis Convention Center on February 17th through the 19th. I think on the night of the 16th, which is Thursday, I believe we're going to have our Film Fest once again, which was a huge hit last time. There's going to be some new stuff coming to the show this year, and it's a true national convention for all of our chapters in the nation. We're inviting every single one of them. It's going to be a huge chapter presence. If you're looking at coming to the Friday or Saturday night fundraising events, which are always a hit, be sure to buy your tickets early. I know we've sold 900 of the 1,500 tickets already. So it's gonna be a big bash, and it's all for wildlife habitat conservation for our favorite birds and public places to go out and chase them.
Can people still submit films for the Film Fest? Is it,
they can, I believe. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can check on that, but I believe if you email me, I can put you in touch with the person that's coordinating all of that right now.
Perfect. Okay. Very good. Well, nice to see it back in Minnesota, of course. Always good to get out into some of those other states, but nice to have you guys back home for the big shindig this year. Jared Wiklund, Tom Carpenter, keep up the good work there at Pheasants Forever. For you, get yourself a membership if you don't have one. And guys, thanks for the time today on the show, and let's get a trip planned.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bret. Thanks, Dan.
852 million acres of public land, 147 million private properties, all in the palm of your hand. The #1 hunting GPS app just got better. With hundreds of custom map layers, 3D and topographic maps, you can easily scout on the road or at home before you go. And now you can get important weather details, CWD detection, and even know what crops have been planted where. Get the most trusted hunting GPS app ever made. OnX. Know where you stand with OnX.
All right, time now to head up to Ottertail Lakes Country to check in with Eric Osberg, who spent some time on the water. Eric, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. How are you, Brett?
You know, I'm focusing on hunting. We did try going fishing the other day. It was pretty tough for us. It was cold and I don't know if we just didn't time it right or what. But I've been so focused on hunting, but I know fishing is really starting to get good. And you had a pretty good night out there, didn't you?
We did. We went out on Ottertail Lake under I don't know if it was the full moon. It was, a bright moon. I do know that. We went out under the moonlight on Ottertail Lake. The October full moon is one of my favorites. I've had some really memorable nights out on the water, and it took us a while to find the fish, but eventually we found the walleyes and we caught some good ones. Dan's on the spot again. Yeah, it took us a while to find them, but we found them, and you and I have talked about this before. I love pulling cranks, and it was a successful night on the water for sure.
You like fishing at night, don't you?
I do. Well, I'm a second shift kind of guy, just to begin with. Maybe it's because I'm lazy. I'm not sure, but yeah. I like fishing at night. I think number one, it's when I have time to, right? Mm-hmm. Like I have a day job, so I don't get to fish during the day as much as I want. There's less competition usually, and from that I mean boats. There's less activity. It was pretty busy at the landing on Saturday night, but it was a Saturday night, full moon or pert near full moon. But so
there were a lot of guys fishing at night that day.
Yeah,
night?
I remember. We always play a game when we pull into the access. We say, guess how many boats. Like we establish an over under, right? Like how many boats are there going to be? And my buddy said 5, and I said 15, and I think there was 17. And there was 17. And that was just at the Riviera access on Ottertail. Wow. So I don't know what was at the other 2 accesses, but what's funny is when you get Ottertail's a big lake. It's 14,000 acres, right? And so you get out there and you're like, where'd all the boats go, right? Like where is everybody? Yeah. So it worked out though. It was a good bite.
Room to fish. We went out before sunrise and fished right away at first light. And right away, my buddy Tony's like, yeah, let's meet there at, what time was that, Dan? Like 6:15 or whatever. It was 6:45, whatever.
6:45, but yeah. It was jet black.
Oh man, that's so early. I'm a second shifter too. Like I like doing stuff in the afternoon and evenings. I like hunting. Yeah. Duck hunting is a little different, but pheasant hunting and fishing. When we're recording this, by the way, we're having apparently some sort of thunderstorm here in October.
Welcome back to Florida.
I guess. Wow, this is kind of interesting here in thunder outside on October 12th. Anyway, it was early morning. The landing was busy as well where we were fishing. There were a lot of guys out there, a lot of boats, and I think we saw one sheephead get caught while we were out there. We only gave her about 2 hours or so, excuse me, hour and a half, 2 hours, and it was cold and it was slow, so we had work to do. So we got off the water. But so let's go back to your night, October full moon, and you're pulling cranks. What were you targeting, and did you find fish right away? You said it took you a while to find the fish?
It took us a while. Spot number 1 didn't work. Spot number 2 didn't work. Spot number 3 kind of, but spot number 4 worked. And what I wanted to share is normally my go-to when I'm pulling cranks normally is a number 5 Fire Tiger flicker shad from Berkeley. And I will say I'm not affiliated with Berkeley in any way, shape, or form. I just really like these flicker shads. And so a buddy of mine introduced me to a new lure, not groundbreaking or anything, but it worked really well. It's a number 7 shallow. And so what I'm typically doing is I'm trolling in 10 feet of water, give or take a foot or 2, right? And so this usually gets me where I need to be. But what we found on Saturday night is the fish were congregated in an area. There was a really big spot, a really big shoreline. There was 3 or 4 other boats on this shoreline, and it's a large shoreline. And we picked up a fish. And I kind of wanted to get away from those other boats. There you go. And so if you can find the shallow one, that's the key though. You got to get that shallow running lip on there. So I said to my buddy, I said, let's try to get away from these boats. Let's try to expand this bite. And so we kept going, and we found a pocket full of weeds. right next to the break. And when you stood up and you turned your headlamp on, you could see like it was thick weeds. And normally we would go on the shallow side of that. Like we caught his fish as shallow as 6 feet, but for whatever reason, I ran on the deep side of those weeds. And the weeds were, so we were like 10, 11, 12, even 13 feet. And the weeds were like halfway up. And so what this number 5 did is it was a bigger profile, but it only ran like halfway down. And so, and I don't know if this will show up on it, but you can see those marks on there. Those are fresh walleye marks. So nice. if you're into trolling cranks, and I've been throwing a number 7 or a number 5, whatever, but this number 7 shallow, if I can pick it up, this number 7 shallow is there you go, the Berkeley shallow flicker shad. Love that bait. Our color was a darker color that the fish seemed to like on that night, but I love the way they run. I love the way they sound in the water, and I love the way that fish hammer.
So you're running them above the weeds. Then at that point, were you going pretty fast, or did you run them slow?
We over 2 miles an hour. 2.2, 2.3, 2.4. Sometimes the wind was behind us. Sometimes it was in front of us. I don't have a fancy boat. I just have an old tiller with a 50 horse Merc, and so if I need to slow down, I'll drop my trolling motor just to give some resistance in the water. And I tried that a few times. We did try going super fast. We tried like 3 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour, dare I say 5 miles an hour up in those shallower spots.
Oh, the Randon approach.
The Randon approach, yeah. I feel it feels goofy going that fast, so I give up on it right away. But it was weird. There was like one stretch, right? Like we'd go through there, and I'd be like, all right, get ready to get hit. Boom, he'd get hit. And then boom, I'd get hit. And then we'd turn around and we'd come back through. But if I was 7 feet this way, it was too weedy. And if I was 7 feet that way, it was 30 feet of water. So, blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. So we were lucky to find a good spot. The spot on the spot. And the cool thing is the fish were all plump. Even the 18 inchers, were just nice and fat. And when we cleaned them, and we did keep them, this was a keep and clean trip. It was funny because their stomachs were pretty empty. So it wasn't that they were full of food; they were just really healthy. And my buddy Matt Parker, he was the one who went with me. He always loves to dissect them and look in their stomachs to see what they're eating. And the ones that did have bait in there were they were eating little perch. So, but yeah, it was a good night. No giants. I think 21 was our biggest, or 21 and a half. But it was a good trip. It was a fun outing.
Did you pull jigs at all?
We didn't that night, but it is a jig time of year. I did take Willie and one of his buddies. We left Ottertail County, believe it or not. We were fishing down.
What?
We were fishing.
Blasphemy.
I know. We were fishing in Morrison County. We were fishing the Mississippi River, and we were using minnows and jigs. And as long as we're doing show and tell, I want to show another thing. Sure. And again, I'm not affiliated with Northland in any way, shape, or form. But these fireball jigs from Northland, these short shanks, I think they're critical when it comes to minnow fishing. And we were using sucker minnows, just regular, not giant sucker minnows or creek chubs, just sucker minnows. Yep, there's just a plain old fireball jig. And I really like these because when you hook the minnow through the mouth and out the top of the head, they just look real. The minnow looks really natural. When Randon Olson and I did really well in the Real Country Classic back in May on Ottertail, we were using fireball jigs and shiners. And it's just, I used to use long shank jigs with my minnows, whether it was a shiner or a sucker or a fatter or whatever, and you kind of run the through and whatever. But I don't feel like I lose any fish because the shank is short, and I really like the way it sits inside of the minnow, if you will, and the way that minnow looks in the water. And so a lot of times I'm a live bait rig guy when it comes to minnows, but this year, just because I was lazy, again, back to me being lazy, I was just like, you know what, let's just use a jig. And it worked just fine. So
I had this conversation with some of the guys the other day about hunting, and I made the comment too. It's kind of like the lazy way to do it, but You know, we're getting to that age, Eric, where we've been doing this for a while, and I think it's less about being lazy and more about being smart. I think.
Well, we could. Sure, we could go with that. You will work smarter, not harder. If that's the approach you want to take.
That's what I'm going with.
Yeah, it's whatever. Hey, whatever works, right? Like if you catch fish because you're wearing your hat backwards or because you got all your change in your left pocket, whatever, or get a deer or whatever, whatever works for you. But those are the advice that I would give people is number one, get out on the water still. I mean, if you're in hunting mode, I get that, but there is still plenty of good fishing right now, and I'll be fishing up until first ice. And if you're pulling cranks, don't be afraid to go shallow and try some new cranks. I will say this: my buddy Matt was running a Rapala SSR 5, and he caught fish too. So it wasn't like that had to be the bait.
Yeah.
But go shallow, adjust your speed, and try some different things at least just to mix it up.
You know, I don't know how much wind you're getting up there or how much wind you got in the last couple of days, but I'd assume colors are about at their peak up there. But I bet a lot of those leaves are going to be coming off the trees here pretty quick.
Yeah, and glad you brought it up. I was at Maplewood State Park yesterday. I was amazed at how much color was still there. I really was. Like the color, I live over, eastern part of the county. And it's pretty dull color wise. And then I got to Maplewood State Park and I was like, the lights are still on. Like, and especially, and maybe, I don't know if you've been in the woods yet, but when you're talking about fall colors, it's like baking a turkey, right? It starts on the outside and then it kind of works its way in. If you can get in the woods right now, I'll bet you'd see plenty of fall colors. So you might have to switch from driving around to enjoy the fall colors to actually stopping and getting out and walking through the woods. Cause I was amazed by the fall colors I saw yesterday. I thought we were way past peak.
Well, and I'm south. And I'm south of you a little bit, Eric, but I, before that cold front moved through here this week, I went out and was flying the drone around and getting our colors were perfect. I'd say that we were about peaking, and we're starting to lose them now with the wind. But there's probably still, you're right. I've never heard it described like that, like baking a turkey before.
I've never really noticed it before, but you know what I mean? The insides of the woods are the last to turn. Right. And so, it's you got to get out of the car. Got to get out of the car, walk through the woods. I
love it.
And enjoy it that way.
All right, Eric. Well, if people want to come up there yet this fall, or if they want to plan something for this winter, or maybe start looking into vacation time next summer in the Lakes Country, where should they go to find their inner otter?
They can find their inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com.
Did you know there are more than 1,000 lakes in Ottertail County?
Yep, and I'm going to fish as many as I can. I'm an outdoorsy otter. Nothing beats a full day of fishing for me. The lakes of Ottertail County give me plenty of options to lower my boat and snag the perfect catch. Not an outdoorsy otter? No problem. Ottertail County has something for everyone. You just need to find your inner otter.
To find your inner otter, go to ottertaillakescountry.com. Northern Minnesota's Walleye Factory is a year-round world-class fishing destination. The perfect getaway this summer is just a short drive to Lake of the Woods. Fish Big Traverse Bay, the Rainy River, or visit the unique Northwest Angle. To catch big fish, you have to go where the big fish are. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. That's lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
All right, now we're going to head up to Lake of the Woods to check in with Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism. Joe, you're almost to the lake now, it looks like.
Yeah, heading up. I got some different meetings and things up at Lake of the Woods, and it's an exciting weekend. I mean, the shiners are in the river, the walleyes are in the river. There's a big tournament, the Chili Bowl tournament at Boardview Lodge this weekend. So I know a number of teams that are pre-fishing already, and I'm hearing some really good reports, both from the not only the river, but also the lake. And fishing's happening, man. Fall movements, fall patterns of walleyes, and it's exciting. It's also exciting talking about ice fishing. I mean, these walleyes are starting to go into their fall haunts, so that when people that fish early ice, when they get out there, those walleyes are going to be stacked like they always are, and things are things are playing out. It's awesome.
Yeah, well, and obviously the Rainy River is kind of legendary in the fall and the spring, and year round realistically. But how about fall fishing up at the Northwest Angle, Joe?
Oh, it's incredible. Fishing up in the Northwest Angle, quite honestly, all summer has been incredible. A lot of the charter boats from the south end of the lake have been going up to the Northwest Angle just because there's been a lot of eater fish up there. Where they're hanging out, they stick around pretty good, meaning, they're hanging on structure or in some of the mud flats, and they move a little bit here and there, but they stay fairly put, which means you go back the next day, and in most cases, those fish are around, and that's advantageous. Somebody might say, why would a charter boat go all the way across Lake to the Woods and spend all that gas? And I'll tell you the reason for it is these resorts do everything they can, if you're in their charter boat, to get you on good fish, and that's why.
Yeah. We're going up there next week. Pretty excited about it. We're going to be doing some hunting, but we're also going to fish while we're up there, Joe. And obviously you got different opportunities, different species to fish for, muskies, you can get into some crappies, pike, of course, walleyes up there. If you were going to go up there next week, Joe, what would you fish for?
I think I would probably start out for walleyes just to kind of, wet the palate, get that out of my system. And once I got enough walleyes out of my system, what I would like to do is probably just go work some shorelines, go work some bays, and cast different lures. Cast a chatterbait, cast some spinnerbaits, cast some crankbaits. You'll get multi-species, but that is so much fun. It's like you're hunting, right? It's like you're just working shorelines in go-to areas, whether they're points, whether they're bays with a little bit of weed in them. Maybe it's a saddle coming between two islands. Maybe it's a neck down area where there's a little bit of current coming through. It's just, to me, it's so exciting getting to those go-to spots and making those first few casts. Somebody's always going to catch a fish. Lake of the Woods, you never know what it's going to be. Is it going to be a 52-inch muskie? Is it going to be a 47-inch pike? Is it going to be a big walleye, a big smallmouth, a big crappie, a big perch? They're all hitting. They're all being caught right now as we speak.
I'm excited to go up next week. Dan and I are going up, and we're going to the Angle, and we're going to do some layout boat duck hunting, which is something I've always wanted to do. And there's only a handful of lakes in Minnesota that you can do it on. And Joe, you found us a guy that will take us out up there. He does some guiding up there. Is that right?
Yeah. So Forrest Husett, and then I think he combines with Andy Reeves on the duck hunting. But yeah, those two guys do the layout boat duck hunting. And Brett, as you know, there's only a few big lakes in Minnesota that it's legal to do the layout boat hunting. And you should, for some of the listeners that might not know what layout boat hunting, it might be good just to kind of tune them in a little bit.
Well, maybe we can. Yeah, maybe Dan can pull up a picture. But essentially, you're in a boat. It's usually just for one person. Sometimes they have 2-person boats, but they sit real low to the water. It's almost like being in a layout blind that floats, essentially. So you're laying right down there on the surface of the water. Usually got a diver line out in front of you then, and you're shooting these divers from essentially laying on your back on the water, on the lake. It's kind of unique. It's pretty interesting. And again, they do it a lot on Lake Michigan. They'll do it for divers and sea ducks over there, and bigger water hunts. A lot of times they'll do that with these layout boats. And it's not legal on a lot of lakes because particularly in Minnesota, if you're going to hunt out of a boat, most areas you have to be concealed within vegetation. You can't just anchor your boat up out in the middle of the lake and shoot ducks out there. Some states you can, Minnesota you can't. But they've legalized this open water hunting out of these layout boats in a number of lakes. I think Pepin, Mille Lacs, Lake of the Woods, Superior. And they actually opened it up for public discussion. Was that last year, Dan, that they discussed maybe legalizing more open water hunting opportunities in Minnesota, and they didn't have enough support for it. So you may see it grow, you may not, I don't know. It gives these people that are on these bodies of water kind of a unique opportunity for those of us that want to try a different style of waterfowl hunting. So I don't know what we're going to shoot. I haven't heard duck numbers up on the lake at this point. The weather that we've had, we definitely should have had some good pushes of birds into the area. So I'm sure we're going to shoot some divers up there, maybe some mallards, but I'm guessing probably some buffs and some ringers and some of the other divers that cruise around up there. But it's just going to be a unique experience. Even if honestly, Joe, even if we don't pull the trigger, I'm going to enjoy it just because I've never had a chance to do it before.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I think you'll pull the trigger. But I think the other thing they say too is that a lot of those birds coming down from Canada, these are the first hunters that they're going to experience. So they're not going to be real gun shy, and they're flying across that open water and they see a string of decoys. Heck, they don't even think twice about that. Whatever that is laying in the water there. I mean, they can, they come right up, and it's really cool too because they get those string of decoys and they'll follow that string right up to your darn boat, and then it's blast fest for you guys.
Yeah, and I'm sure we will pull the trigger as well too. We'll see how many we hit, but we'll definitely pull the trigger, and it's going to be a good experience. And I know we're staying at Flag Island up there, so I'm looking forward to doing this show because I've been up to the angle a few times. I've never done it where you drive through Canada to get up there. So I'm kind of looking forward just to just seeing what that experience. I've heard you talk about that for about 10 years on this show, but I've never done it going through Canada to get up to the angle. We took the winter road, the ice road, up to the angle and drove up there, but we've never gone up through Canada. So I'm looking forward to that experience.
Yeah, we'll see if you get through or not.
Well, I should have been to Canada twice already this year, so hopefully.
I know.
I should.
Well, over on this side, they watch it pretty close. Like they say, it keeps the riffraff out of the angle. But you should have no problems. Now, especially, you don't have to be vaccinated and you don't have to have the Arrive Can, which I know that you've done both before. But you know what? You don't have to have that stuff anymore. So it's making it easier for just about everybody to get up, whether you're fall fishing or whether you're thinking about going up there ice fishing this winter. Now it's just like the good old days where you just have to have, your credentials like a passport and such, and you can slide on through. And once you do it once or twice, it's real easy. It's no big deal. When you're sliding up there, one of the things you might want to do is there's a little town of Sprague, Manitoba, on your way to the angle. You drive about 40 miles through Manitoba, and then you enter back into the Minnesota, the angle up there. But when you go through that little town of Sprague, they got a little grocery store on the right-hand side called Carl and Kay's Fine Foods, and Murray Matchett owns that. And I'll tell you, it's just a little bit over the border, but you stop in that grocery store, and they got a few things that you can't get in the U.S. They got that world famous Winnipeg rye bread that they bake in Winnipeg Bakery. It's real good. They got Canadian jams. They got coffee crisp candy bars, English toffee candy bars. They have what else? Oh, they got different kind of chips. They got like ketchup potato chips, and they got
I don't understand. I don't understand the ketchup potato chips. We have seen Canadian grocery stores quite a bit this year. Dan is excited. He already said he wants.
Do they have root beer? A&W.
Well, they got flavors up there. It's weird because it's even like Old Dutch and brands that we know, but they're different flavors.
Different flavors, and Old Dutch makes a party mix that. I used to be able to get here, and I haven't seen it in a store around here for years, not since I lived in Fargo. Even there, I think they pulled them off the shelves. But I can find it in Canada, everywhere. Every co-op gas station, every place has got that Old Dutch party mix. So I always have to grab some of that. But Dan's excited about the candy bars up there. He already said we need to stop in Sprague and get a candy bar.
So have you had the Wonder Bar?
No, I haven't.
Oh, that's the best one. I've got 2 in the freezer that I brought back from last time that I'm saving for a special occasion. Those are they're so good. They're made by Cadbury, and you can only find them in Canada.
Have you tried that coffee crisp?
Yeah, that one's good too. I don't know. It's like number 3 on my Canada candy bar rating.
It's not bad.
It's number 2.
I'm trying to think.
Well, did you notice, like Cadbury makes a lot of candy bars that are available in Canada, but have you noticed that a lot of them are like that coffee crisp or that Aero? They're real like light wafery, and I mean there's like a theme. Like all the candy bars are kind of similar. It seemed like.
I haven't noticed that. I haven't really thought about it, but
we sampled a lot of them this summer.
I work a lot. I don't have a lot of time to think about stuff like that, I guess.
Well, what was that one, Dan, that you got?
The caramel one? Gosh, what is that one called?
Your grandpa told you to get it? Or?
No, my mom. So my grandpa, when he would go on fishing trips to Canada, he would buy this for my mom. What is it called?
I don't know. I'm going to try to figure it out.
I should know this, but it's like a chocolate caramel, and that's how she explained it. She's like, it's a caramel. You should try to get one if you go up there. So I found it. Well, it's this like hard caramel. And so you can't just bite into it and eat it. You got to sit there, and it's like this big rectangle, And so I was trying to just bite it and eat into it. And it tasted good, but it was so hard to eat. Gosh, what was that called?
That I think that was created by like a dentist in that area, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably. My mom's probably screaming at it. She's going to text me here in about 2 minutes when she watches this, just screaming at the TV.
Be happy with you.
This is what it's called.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, it's for a lot of people though. It's like, we always talk about the adventure. Yeah, I want to shoot some ducks, and I want to get some walleyes and maybe other fish. But it's about the whole thing. It's about the anticipation. It's about going through customs and seeing the people at U.S. and Canada customs when you go through. Most of the people are super nice. It's all part of it. It's driving through Canada and those, part of the road is tar, part of it is dirt road. It's looking for deer. It's looking for the different wildlife when you're up there. And then you enter back into Minnesota, and it's just noticing how the signs are different. And I mean, the whole thing, it's part of the adventure. Stopping at Carl and Case Fine Foods and picking up the candy bars, the famous Winnipeg rye bread. That rye bread, by the way, it's not like a hard rye. It's like a cracked wheat. Real good. Oh, you guys love it. You can't get that when you're in Canada. That's only around the Winnipeg area, so I know that for a fact.
So we're excited about this trip, and I totally forgot what I was going to say. Now you got me thinking about Canadian road signs, and
it's just turned into Canada Candy Bar family.
Yeah, I totally lost my train of thought on what I was going to say, but it is all about the experience the whole time, and we're going to be filming it for Sporting Journal Radio. We're actually going to be filming a couple of things while we're up there, so you'll be able to follow along. We'll make Dan get a bunch of candy bars. We'll do a candy bar taste test on the Sporting Journal Radio travel vlog that you can watch on the Sporting Journal Radio YouTube channels, and we're also going to be filming this duck hunt and cast and blast at the Northwest Angle for Prairie Sportsmen. So watch for that episode coming next season, starting in January on Pioneer PBS and a PBS station near you. And Joe, if people want to plan a trip to the Angle or Lake of the Woods or the Rainy River, what should they do?
I will tell you what they should do, but first I'll tell you that Flag Island bar is pretty darn nice too, and you might want them to do a couple of taste tests there and put that on camera because that might be a little bit more adventurous. But nonetheless, if you want to find out more about fishing or hunting Lake of the Woods, everything's on our website, lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Sporting Journal Radio is a division of Macaba LLC. If you've got a question, comment, or story idea for us, send us an email. Go to sportingjournalradio.com. While you're there, you can learn how to advertise on the show and visit our store for hats, hoodies, coffee mugs, and more. Go to sportingjournalradio.com.